It's time. Assaulting the narrative. Destroying the lie. Unearthing the truth.
You can't handle the truth.
Live from West Palm Beach, Florida. Heard coast to coast and all around the world. High Noon with John Gordon.
Brad Carver, he is a special interest person. Translation, he lobbies the Georgia legislature, okay? And he works for a very prominent Atlanta law firm and is with us today on The Truth. Brad, happy Easter and welcome to The Truth.
Happy Easter. Great to see you, John.
Thank you so
and
much.
You're a patriot yourself.
Well, thank you. You know, I do care about the country, and I mean that sincerely. It has been so good to me. I've got two of our three sons here. I've got my new grandbaby here from Los Angeles this weekend. And none of the things that I've done would be possible if I didn't live in a free country and in a capitalist society where you can work hard and get rewarded for it. And that's what I care about. But today, I care about honest, free elections. And you've been down at the Georgia legislature this session. Is it over now? Do we have sine die? Are we done?
It is, yes. It's over. And
last night, right?
It was over, yes. It finished late or early into the morning on Friday. So gotcha. we are now done with our 40-day session. And I've been in a suit all week, so my Duke Blue Devils are hopefully going to make the Final Four tomorrow. We play NC State, so I'm sporting my shirt today. I'm being a little casual, but I'm here in my law office. And I just wanted to follow up based on the last comment you said. I also agree. I do not think we had a fair and accurate election in 2020. And ground zero for that here in Georgia was Fulton County, which is where I live and work.
And where I live and my businesses operate.
Fulton County, truly, for those, your listeners, it's 1.1 million people. It is more than 10% of the state of Georgia lives in Fulton County, and it is a heavily Democratic county, though I will say that it wasn't that long ago that we did win some countywide Republican elections. But I credit the ballot harvesting operation of the left, and it certainly has made impacts. It does swing very close elections, and it obviously swung the 2020 election, in my opinion. And that's based, like you said, on looking at this. I was at State Farm Arena. I am familiar with all the players, and I'm pretty familiar with what happened with 2020, and which is why Chairman David Schaefer appointed me to be the Election Confidence Task Force chairman for the Georgia Republican Party. And that I did that, and I'm still continuing in that role to today, now under the leadership of Chairman Josh McCoon. And we did a lot with Senate Bill 202. So that's the first thing I want to tell your listeners. I think that Senate Bill 202 improved our elections considerably. And if there's any evidence of that, it would be the fact that there have been 15 federal lawsuits filed against us because the Democrats don't like it when we try to make fair and accurate elections. But what we have learned over the last 3 years is there was work left to be done. Senate Bill 202 was very good, but it still had left some issues out there. And so we have been working hard during the last last three legislative sessions to make improvements. The last two sessions before this one, we haven't been able to get much done. We've had a lot of good legislation, but ultimately those did not get passed, other than trying to correct the Zuckerbucks issue, which is many of your listeners know that 94% of those Zuckerbucks have gone to Democratic counties and in an attempt to swing elections, and we wanted that money proportionally distributed to all Georgia counties per capita. And unfortunately, we've seen the left try to circumvent those rules. So last year, we went back in and tightened that law up. But this year, we made significant progress. I will say there's some big ticket items we're still interested in doing. We allow no excuse absentee ballots in Georgia. I think that's a mistake. I will point your listeners to the 2005 Carter Baker Commission that said that absentee ballots are the least secure method of voting. That they encourage vote buying schemes, voter intimidation, and vote harvesting, and it should be used as a method of last resort. We all know the cases where absentee ballots should be used. We have been trying to get the state of Georgia to follow the state of New York, and those are examples, or those are instances that all of you are familiar with. That would be like you're in the hospital, you're deployed in the military, you're out of the state on work business and can't be able to vote in person, you're over the age of 70. Those are all legitimate reasons to use absentee ballots, but everyone else should be going and voting in person. It is much more secure when we are able to check people's IDs at the door and to be able to control the voting process. Because if you think about it, when we send absentee ballots out, they go all over the world, and there's no one there to monitor the actual filling out of those ballots. And because we have drop boxes, it also creates another level of insecurity. So we would still like to see those drop boxes eliminated, elimination of no excuse absentee ballots. And then the final big ticket one is to go back to opt-in motor voter. What does that mean? It means that in Georgia, unfortunately, we're opt-out. Whenever you go and get a new driver's license or get it renewed, you're automatically registered to vote in Georgia. In other states, in a majority of states, that is not the case. You actually have to want to be registered to vote, and that's what I wish we would do with the state of Georgia. So we'll continue to push on those items in the coming years, the next year's legislative session. But this year, I am very proud to say that we had a number of objectives and bills running through the General Assembly. And on the last day of the session, we got all of those across the finish line. And I'm really happy with how strong our House and Senate leaders, the executive branch, stood, and the fact that every single Republican in the General Assembly supported this legislation. So I'll stop there for a second. But I want to tell everybody that I think I'm very optimistic going into this election, that we have significantly improved our election system.
Well, that is great news, Brad. And ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to one smart guy here. He is a partner at Hall Booth Smith and the senior managing director of the law firm's governmental affairs division. He is a Duke undergrad, and he has a JD MBA from the University of Georgia. He spent 28 years as an Army officer. So it is an honor, Brad, to have you on the show. So Senate Bill 202, right in the aftermath of 2020, imposed voter ID cards, correct? And it got rid of all the drop boxes that were outside the polling place. And it did, as I recall, to some extent, curtail absentee ballots. I don't recall the specifics on that, but when we enacted the law that said, okay, you got to show your ID to vote, the Dems just went apoplectic, and it cost us the Major League Baseball All-Star game, which they then moved to Denver, which has more restrictive voting laws than Georgia does. These fake narratives and the lies and the deception get under my skin. What in the world is going on? And to me, how can you say that showing an ID is voter suppression? I think it's election integrity fostering, and to call it suppression is just not real, is it?
No, it's not. And listen, one thing I know about the Democrats, they have two major plays in their playbook. One is they use identity politics. In other words, they say if you are a certain race or you're a certain gender or orientation or a certain religion, you have to vote Democrat. And to me, that's insulting. That's saying, you can't think for yourself. If you're this, then we're just going to harvest your votes. Republicans don't think like that. We welcome anybody to our party who believe in our ideas and our policies. And I'm very proud of that. And I also heard, taking questions before I got on here, I do see a significant movement in non-traditional voters to the Republican Party. So one thing that the Democrats are terrified of is that that will continue because they have played this identity politics game for so long. The second thing that the Democrats always do is they accuse us of trying to, Jim Crow 2.0, to change our election laws to target certain groups. And what they have not been able to show is any evidence of that because it's simply not true. And in fact, when they make arguments like if you're black or you're Hispanic, that you can't show an ID or you can't find the correct precinct or you can't go to the DMV, those to me are soft racist arguments. I think they're insulting arguments. And to compare the state of Georgia and what we did with Senate Bill 202 to what the Democrats did during segregation is to me it is unbelievable insulting behavior to their voters. And Republicans don't think like that.
I totally agree with you.
Everybody equal.
And when they don't have anything else to do, they just start making stuff up and lying and being loose with the truth. But help me understand, what is the argument for retaining drop boxes? As I understand it, they're only open during the hours that the polls are open. And when you go to the voting place, you can turn left and go to a machine like everybody else, or you can turn right and go to a drop box. Why do we need drop boxes? Are they not? Here's my real question. Aren't drop boxes just an instrumentality for fraud?
I think they are. Okay, because we have wire fraud, mail fraud laws in our country. So if you use the U.S. postal system by mailing an absentee ballot and you're committing election fraud, that's a felony. Well, it's a felony to fraudulently vote in an election, but it's also a felony to do that through the U.S. Postal Service. So one argument is if you have a drop box, you don't have to mail in a ballot, so you're not using the Postal Service. That takes away one of the legal impediments to election fraud. But the other thing these things I worry about them not being monitored or being monitored by inside players, meaning people that have an agenda that work in certain election offices across the state. That's what always concerns me. And I've always said, you have the ability to mail in ballots. And here's an interesting thing. Do you realize that if you mail in an absentee ballot and you don't put a stamp on it, the Postal Service will deliver, and they identify it as a ballot, obviously, because it's in a ballot envelope. Those will be delivered without postage. So I just think everybody's got a drop box at the end of their street. If you live in a condo or an apartment building, there's a mailbox that's there for all the residents. You can do that. I don't understand why there's the necessity for drop boxes. And of course, they came around because of COVID. And if I don't know if you all realize this, but we're now at the 4-year mark from when the CDC determined and made the recommendation to the country that everybody vote by absentee ballot. And they did that in the guise of COVID, which is just really interesting to me.
I'll say it. It's beyond interesting. I think it was orchestrated. I think it was an intentional act. I think it was planned. I think that they executed it incredibly well. And just like when the CIA killed Kennedy, they came out with the Warren Commission, which was a fabrication. It was a complete lie. There was very little truth in the Warren Commission report. So this go round, I call 2020 JFK 2.0. This was a stolen election, and to take everybody's mind and eyes away from it, they diverted your attention to the January 6th Commission, which was a report on the breach of the Capitol. And that was a fairy tale in the way that it was presented. Look, was it something that we're proud of? Absolutely not. Was there violence there? Yes, there was. Were the majority of people there to do violent acts? Absolutely not. A very small handful of people did the violent acts. Some people think they were provocateurs and that they were not actually there out of their conscience, but rather some sort of political operation to create havoc. We know that Donald Trump offered 10,000 National Guard officer or units to come into the Capitol to maintain the peace, and we know that Nancy Pelosi and the Democratic liberal mayor of Washington turned them down. So that's my theory, that's my belief, and it's not just something that I've casually developed. It's after a result of 4 years of reading and working and looking at the evidence, and that is the conclusion that I have come to. What we want to do is prevent that from happening in 2024. So, Brad, give us the meat on the bone. What did the legislature do? What did they enact that adds to Senate Bill 202 and is going to make our elections more secure this November?
Yeah, and let me just add that your comments comparing this to JFK's assassination. One other difference, which makes it even worse with the January 6th Commission, was it was not bipartisan. It was completely partisan with two Republicans that were put on there who hated President Trump, and it was not done in a bipartisan fashion. And we're learning more and more every day about evidence being suppressed and things that were never shown that they were fully cognizant and aware of, but they had a narrative and they wanted to stick with it.
Well,
so
and they cherry picked the videos. They cherry picked about, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours of video out of hundreds of hours of video, and the video did not tell an accurate story of what happened there that day. And I won't get off on a tangent. The only thing is that I think of Ashley Babbitt. I think of her every day and what a horrible wrong that was. And there is no accountability. And it's swept under the rug. And how Democrats could have such a low value for human life and be willing to having taken a human life and sweep it under the rug and not hold somebody accountable and tell the truth around it. But anyway, we digress. So we got new election legislation. What changes can we look forward to?
Yeah, so let me say this. We also including the eliminating no excuse absentee ballots and the drop boxes and going to opt-in motor voter that I've already previously talked about. Those were 3 of our priorities of our task force. The rest of our priorities are contained in what has been passed this legislative session. So I'm very proud of that, and I mentioned that we're going to continue to fight for those other 3. The first thing I'll tell everybody is I think that we have improved our audits that are going to happen going forward. They're going to be they're going to be more extensive. They're going to look at different races. They're going to always look at the closest races, certainly any race that goes to a runoff. That is the minimum standard, meaning even Fulton County has to do it. But then counties can go beyond that and do more extensive audits if they so choose. But the state is establishing a baseline. I think having audits is extremely important for our overall confidence of our voters. And let me just add, before we get into all of the details here, our task force is called the Election Confidence Task Force. Our goal was to give voters more confidence in their elections. And that means all voters. We saw after the 2018 election that Democrats didn't have confidence in the election. And then after the 2020 election, it was certainly Republicans. But we want all voters to have confidence in our election system because we truly believe and want every legal voter to be able to vote in Georgia. We just want to stop the illegal votes in Georgia and the vote harvesting and the things that are going to dilute the votes of every legal voter in the state. And by the way, if we lose an election fair and square on the policies and the issues and our positions are not what the majority of our voters want, well, that's what happens in an election. And then I hope we do a better job when we run the next election. I just don't want to lose elections when there are not accurate results. Okay. And so that to me is what we should all be concerned with. And it really does matter when you have close races like we had with 11,779 votes with Joe Biden over Donald Trump in 2020. That is an extremely close total out of 5 million votes cast. But there are House districts that have been decided by 300 votes. And even smaller amounts. So when you have election fraud, it can actually mean that the person that should have won didn't win. So we want to minimize that to the greatest extent possible. But also, if our Republican voters have confidence in the election, and I hope they do, they will come out and vote, and we will have enough ballots that even they can't cheat enough to stop. So that's our first goal is to make sure we blow the doors off. And I heard of one of your callers before this. We have got to all come out and we've got to all support President Trump and all of our Republican candidates. That's first and foremost. If someone chooses not to vote because they don't have confidence in the election, then we're losing that vote. So I want everyone to have confidence and go out and vote, and I think we'll win in the end. So,
well, I have heard President Trump say on numerous occasions that we've got to overwhelm them with votes so that it's so overwhelming that they can't cheat. I can't put my whole faith and confidence in our election just on that. And so I am so pleased to hear that the Georgia legislature has continued to work on election integrity. I think that's a giant step in the right direction. So the audit that you mentioned, what triggers the audit? Who does the audit? Are there independent observers allowed and present for these audits?
So this is expanding the risk limiting audits. It makes them more expansive and standardizing how that would work. And it really creates some independence because it's going to be done through just the results of the election and focusing on the closest results. You can't just decide to audit one election versus another based on some random criteria. It will have to be because these were the closest elections. So I think, and because it doesn't limit a county from doing more than that, I think it's a very good thing. We will see some of our counties go beyond that, and I think that's a very good thing. We've seen that after these municipal elections last year, where folks were wanting to verify with a hand count the elections and compare it to what the results of the Dominion voting machines are. And so let me move into the next thing that we accomplished this legislative session.
Let me ask you before you move on. Does the Secretary of State, does he conduct the risk limiting audits?
That is done by the counties.
By the counties.
Yes.
And was there any initiative that was given serious consideration that would make ballots subject to Open Records Acts, particularly absentee ballots?
Yes, and we accomplished that as well. So that basically you are obviously very familiar with the litigation that's happened in Fulton County and us trying to get access to the absentee ballots in Fulton County. As you know, we were given 300 DPI images of the absentee ballots from Fulton County. That's going to continue. That is mandated. That those will be posted by the Secretary of State, so everyone in the state would have access to those ballot images. But to your point, this legislation is also going to enable people to request the ballots, and they can get they can actually get not the actual ballots, but a higher resolution of the ballots beyond 300 DPI, as long as the person is willing to pay those costs. And so that's also contained in the legislation.
Now, what about the QR codes? That is a very worrisome component of a ballot. And folks, when you go into the poll and you score your ballot, a QR code, supposedly, it's what I understand, is created and stamped onto that ballot, which is really where the tabulation or where your ballot is scored. It's not the line items that you and I see when we score our ballot. It's really translated into a QR code that the computer can then read. That is potentially very concerning to me that a QR code, nobody can read it except the people that create it and the computer that reads it. Who's to say that it reflects the ballot that was scored?
That's right, and we have had a lot of discussions, and all of these recommendations and the things that the legislature has passed. I will say that our election confidence task force voted unanimously to support. And when I was lobbying these legislators, it was very important for me to say that I was speaking with one voice from the Republican Party, that the entire Republican Party, from the most moderate person to the most conservative, MAGA, not MAGA, America First, not America First, establishment, whatever you want to say, every faction of the party weighed in on this, and we all agreed. The entire task force agreed with these recommendations. And one of our recommendations was to eliminate the use of the QR code. The legislature has indeed listened to that, and we are working to that. So what is going to happen in this 2024 election is there has been $5 million allocated. This will be a pilot project. There will be, again, audits of, or in these certain places, they're going to have to be less than 5,000 voters in an election. But that can be, it could be a whole county. It could be a portion of another county. But the point is that with this, the new legislation, instead of scanning the QR code, they're going to scan the text. Now, what does that mean? It means it answers exactly what you're talking about, because the QR code, no one can read it.
Brad, I'm going to interrupt you for just 1 second. We've got to take a mandatory pause here to identify our stations. We'll be right back with Brad Carver. Don't move a muscle. We'll be right back. All right, this is The Truth. We're telling you the truth. I'm John Gordon. We're on the John Fredericks Media Network, and today's broadcast is being brought to you by First Liberty Georgia, our sponsors, and welcome them to The Truth. Brad, we got to wrap it up. I got Linda Tyler. She's on the line patiently waiting for us for our next segment called Growing Old Gracefully, BS. Linda's going to tell us how to keep our diet in check. But before we go to Linda, Brad, I want to wrap up with you. Tell us what you think is the most significant legislation that came out of that. What are you the most proud of? And then I want to wish you a happy Easter and thank you for taking time from your Saturday to join us.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I'm going to quickly go through the rest. I mean, not the rest, but just the high points of it. So we also got expanded ballot watch, poll watcher language that's going to offer protections to our poll watchers, give them more access, and that's going to apply in all 159 counties, red counties, blue counties, Democrat poll watchers, Republican poll watchers. I think it was a very good thing, and I'm glad we passed that. The most important thing that, in my opinion, we passed, and in fact, the opinion of our entire task force, is we have improved our voter challenge process. As you know, John, we have almost 1 million people on the Georgia voter rolls right now that should not be voting. They're still on there. They're dead. They have moved out of state. They're not valid voters. There are entries, multiple entries for the same person. All of that creates the opportunity for people for fraudulent or inaccurate votes to be cast in our Georgia elections. And we have volunteers all across the state. I want to give a special shout out to Jason Frazier in Fulton County, who's done an outstanding job. But we have Mark Davis, we have Rick Richards over in Augusta. We have people in all of our big metro counties that are volunteering to go through the voter rolls and challenge invalid entries on the voter rolls. This bill that we passed, Senate Bill 189, is going to improve that process. And it was the bill that the left was targeting more than anything else. Fair Fight, Stacey Abrams' Fair Fight actually had an electronic billboard truck, again, going around the Capitol saying that Republicans were vote suppressors because of her of their organizations and the ACLU's opposition to our legislation. But it is. Go ahead,
Brad. You've just done great work, and I thank you so much. I've got so many other questions I want to ask you, and unfortunately, we're out of time. Has Fonnie Willis rang your phone?
Has you rang my phone?
Yeah. Did you have to go testify?
Yeah, I'm one of the unindicted co-conspirators. Yes. So yeah, I have been through hell and back over the last 3 years because I'm a Republican election lawyer and fighting for the truth in the 2020 election, and we know that can't happen. So it has been a rough ride. I'm standing tall and strong, and I want to give a special shout to all of our unindicted or other unindicted co-conspirators and our ones that are still in the line of fire. Senator Sean Still, obviously Chairman David Schaefer. We want to look after all of those.
Bob Shealy, Jay Smith, President Donald Trump, Jeff Clark, who's a friend of mine, Rudy Giuliani, who they have destroyed. They've taken his house in New York. They're trying to take his house in Palm Beach. They've stripped him of his law license. I've never seen a worse display of abuse of authority, abuse of power, just
election interference
and election interference in pursuit of greed for power and lust for money. And it is just a shame. Brad Carver, have a wonderful Easter. Thank you for coming on The Truth. You're welcome back anytime, and I look forward to seeing you in person soon. I do hope.